Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. It's Glenn and Phil here with you live on YouTube on Tuesday night. And Phil, I guess the first question of the evening is, where do we start after that 2-2 draw against Rangers on Sunday?
Honestly, I mean, if we could have channeled the Donald Trump and stopped the count at 45, we'd have a lot more positive of a podcast to speak about. Still kind of feels like a bit of a gut punch, even 48 hours later. But yeah, hopefully that is the last lack of a full 90 performance we'll be seeing this week.
Yeah, hopefully, and I think we need to speak about that lack of a full 90 performances once again. We failed to deliver, and I actually thought it was quite interesting, Leighton Clarkson mentioning the fact that we didn't produce a full 90-minute performance, and it certainly sounded from the way Leighton spoke, is it something that Jimmy Tillene and the team have spoken about. Also coming up on the show tonight, we will be looking at the post-split fixtures, news of the first game after the split, bit of a spoiler if you've somehow lived under a rock and not seen it. Hibs at home first up. The Dons cutting the allocation for the Hibees visit to Pittodrie, so we'll discuss that and what our thoughts on cutting away allocations is. It'll be interesting to see those tuning in what their thoughts are on that as well. And of course, the Dons head to Hampden this weekend to face bottom six side Hearts in the Scottish Cup semi-final, and we'll preview that game as well. But Phil, unfortunately, we do have to go through a little bit of therapy, I think, on this episode and relive the 90 minutes that was Sunday. But we'll speak about the positive 45 that was the first half. I guess when you saw both the Aberdeen team and the Rangers team, confidence must have been high.
Yeah, I mean, you can't fault Jimmy for going with an unchanged side. I think with what's at our disposal at the moment, anyway, it to me is our best team on paper, and is one that when we come to discuss the Hearts game, hopefully we'll stick that way. And the Rangers team as well, really makeshift. I was kind of surprised. I know that pre-match, Ferguson was saying that he was going to be ringing changes for Bilbao and then ringing changes at Pittodrie on the back of that. But I think the makeshift nature, especially of that back five, shall we say, really filled me with a lot of confidence, and I think that was kind of justified after the sort of first half hour of Ross McCausland as a right wing back.
Yeah, and clearly didn't pay off. Certainly channeling some performances that we've seen about worst 30-minute spells on the Pittodrie pitch in recent times. But from an Aberdeen point of view, the way we started the game with both Topi and Shaden, Topi in his natural position on the left-hand side and Shaden up against Finlay Curtis, both wingers had great success. And, I've probably been quite critical of Pape over the last few weeks about what I actually thought he played particularly well. I know we'll maybe come on to him in a bit more detail later on, but I thought he was disruptive. He caused the centre backs problem. He was that target, and at times as well linked up the play quite well.
Yeah, I think the first sort of 10 minutes or so, 10-15, I found a little bit frustrating. But I think when him and Nisbet swapped their roles a little bit and Pape went more into the nine with Nisbet in behind, we saw a lot better, like I say, the ability for him to hold up the play and give us that little bit of an outball. Rangers really couldn't cope with. Topi and Shaden as well against makeshift wing backs on either side. I believe Curtis is naturally more of a sort of left-sided midfielder as well. The pair of them just caused absolute havoc, and I think when we come to discuss the second half, that was one of the more remarkable changes, was that lack of penetration we had on the wing. But yeah, definitely a lot of positives to take there. And like I say, even myself, I've kind of been quite critical of Pape. I was even quite vocally critical of him the first 10 minutes of a couple of skew whiff passes on Sunday, but he definitely grew into the game. And like I said, it was a really good outball for us getting up the park.
Yeah, and I know we're going to come on to the second half, but yeah, again, I was actually surprisingly disappointed to see him come off in the second half. But yeah, I thought the same about Finlay Curtis, that he was more naturally a midfielder, and I did have to laugh at him in the opening 10 minutes when I don't know if he managed to see the ball out for a goal kick or not, and I don't know if you saw this in the South Stand as well, where he kind of celebrated like he'd won the game, and then proceeded to just get absolutely skinned thereafter by Shayden Morris, channeling his Andy Robertson against Germany in that. But I think from an Aberdeen point of view, with the way the wingers played in that first half, encouragement ahead of heading to Hampden this weekend, obviously the bigger pitch. And I actually was really encouraged by Topi's performance. It was probably as composed as he's looked on the ball. Sometimes he maybe takes an extra touch and then loses a bit of composure in and around the box. But yeah, I thought his all-round game was very good at the weekend. And again, we missed that directness when he went off alongside Shayden Morris.
Yeah, like you say, he was causing problems sort of down that left-hand side, and as well fashioning his own chances. He had one that just sort of, at least from the south stand anyway, looked like it was just wide of the post as he cut it off the left. And obviously, fouled as well for McCausland's second booking, resulting in his red. But a player for me outside of the wingers that I think really stood out in that first half was Alfie Dorrington. I thought the ability of him to basically just drive out from the back with the ball, did a little bit of it second half as well. I thought that was really positive for getting us on the front foot, and it was something obviously we discussed on the last episode, being able to get on the front foot early and play positive football. And I think that also helped us in the midfield as well, even more so when we had that extra body with Rangers being down to 10 men. So yeah, it was really, I thought, quite a positive performance from him as well. A player that's really kind of, I think, growing into the role that's kind of been etched out for him through injury.
It's funny you say that, because for as good as we were going forward in that first half, I think you're right to kind of highlight the defence, because Rangers did look to catch us on the counter-attack and did have the odd opportunity without, in my recollection, really testing Ross Doohan. And again, I think it is a frustration that we've ultimately thrown away 2 points, and I can't remember Ross Doohan really having a significant save to make. But I actually thought Mats Knusters had the better of the first half of the centre back pairing. Just seemed to be like he won everything. The reading of the game was superb as well. It's just disappointing that both of us are highlighting one of them, and they both are guilty for mistakes in the goals in the second half. But I think for me, with the way Knusters was playing, is he's going to be our player next season. And Dorrington, I think there's very little chance he comes back next season. So again, just showing that kind of how good an acquisition he's been since coming in January. But again, as much as we're highlighting the two centre backs, I think Leighton Clarkson, there was a comment, I can't remember who put it in on the show last week. I think it was Can't Be Bothered, and I don't know if he's tuning in currently to the show tonight, but questioning about whether or not Leighton Clarkson would be suitable for the midfield battle, not being lightweight, but certainly showed that he was up for the battle at the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the first thing to come on to was that free kick. Madison, Frank Ross-esque against Rangers. As soon as we put the ball down, I don't know if you were the same, but everybody around me just seemed to feel like it was just going to nestle into the net. It just seemed almost destined. But outside of that, like I say, I think his combative nature that we haven't really seen a lot of in the midfield really shone through, especially for the second goal. I mean, he had about 4 or 5 bites at trying to win that ball back before Jensen eventually played it up to Shady Mo. But it almost felt kind of like a game of two halves for Clarkson. I don't think he was bad in the second half. I think just the change in our shape kind of affected him. But that first half, he was absolutely immense. Played his role absolutely perfectly, and again, it just kind of highlighted how good it is to have a player of his quality to get his foot on the ball.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I do think that the changes did affect him. He didn't obviously have the composure of Palaversa in alongside him, and the left hand side got significantly weaker in that second half as well. But I totally agree. The Madison-esque comments were being muted around where I was sat. We had a free kick out on the touchline about 2 minutes before, and I remember the young boys behind me and Keith saying, "Oh, imagine if this is a Madison," and Keith's like, "Madison's free kick was nowhere near there." So when that free kick was awarded, I was like, "This is Madison territory," albeit I said if I was Leighton Clarkson, I'd be going to the other corner where he put it in. And Keith was like, "No, no, no, you go that side." So again, that's why I'm sat behind a microphone and Leighton Clarkson sitting pinging free kicks. Actually, kind of reminded me of his free kick against St Mirren, be 2 seasons ago now, which helped us obviously finish third that season ahead of Hearts. That's what I remembered. But yeah, great free kick. Great bounce as well for it as well. I guess the people are going to ask the question, which one was better, Leighton Clarkson's or James Madison's? You've mentioned Frank Ross as well, but Frank Ross's came in a defeat. Leighton's comes in a draw. So for me, James Madison's is still the best of the three.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think the unexpected nature, I think, of Madison's as well, also adds to it. You know, we're too used to it after him now. It just seems like it should be a given against Rangers if there's a free kick out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and as Michael Taylor says, we should probably move on to the Hearts game now because that's as good as it gets from the weekend. But it did get better, of course, because we went 2-0 up on the stroke of half time. Again, a really well worked move, as you've highlighted. Jensen and Morris combining terrifically, and Pape Gay finding himself in the right place at the right time to calmly, it has to be commented, slot past Liam Kelly. Certainly more calmer than Mats Knusters was when the game was 0-0 and he ballooned over from inside 5 yards. So, yeah, at that point you're thinking, we're flying and we're doing what Hibs did the other week at Ibrox.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. I mean, even at 2, I still kind of felt like we needed another goal to seal it. And I think that was probably just off the back of, as you say, the sort of squandered chances elsewhere in that half. You know, off the top of my head, Knusters, obviously from close range. I think Pape had one where he kind of scuffed it as well. And yeah, Shaden Morris getting one-on-one maybe should have at least hit the target. You know, so going into half time at 2-0, as good as it felt, you kind of felt like you should have been 3 or 4 up. And obviously, you know, coming out the second half, the last thing you want is to concede an early goal. And really, you're wanting to be the one that gets into the ascendancy early doors. So it was a little bit annoying for Rangers to get back into the game so early.
It was, but of course it could have been earlier as well, and we could have actually been going in at half time at 2-1. Where I sit is almost in line with the edge of the box from the side that the ball got crossed in. I was convinced that the ball hadn't crossed the line, and maybe assuming there was an offside in there that was being flagged for. You're in section T, isn't it? Did it look out from the south stand?
It looked out from where I was. The angle I was at looked like it was well out, and then obviously seeing it later on, it's not as well out as it looked from my position. I'm still pretty certain the ball was out. But yeah, it was a little bit of a heart and mouth. It was one of those ones where, due to the opposition, you kind of almost just expected VAR to overturn it in any way that it could. So I was kind of thankful that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think it's one of them, and I'm just trying to find the point that John Kelo made earlier about the fact that Rangers went down to 10 men helping them, the fact that they were better sitting off and hitting on the break, and that opportunity was a prime example of them catching us on the break, albeit maybe we just had one mind on half time 2-0 up, and that was kind of evident in the second half as well. And as you said there, the one thing that you don't want when you're 2-0 up down playing 10 men is to concede early in the second half. Now, I was speaking to Andre Ellis at work, and he said, I can use this on the podcast, so that's why I've quoted it from him as well, that the weekend's game reminded him exactly of the Dundee United game at Pittodrie when Jim Goodwin's side dominated ourselves in that first half, find themselves 2-0 up. And inexplicably, as we discussed on this show, sat in and we found our way back to draw 2-2, scoring in the 90th minute. And actually, it's probably a good comparison of what we did on Sunday, because I'm sure the talk around many at halftime will be, let's just get that third and we'll see the game off. I know Michael Taylor's mentioned that in the comments as well, that we definitely needed a third to seal the deal. But unfortunately, as soon as Rangers got the first one, certainly for a good 10 minutes, there was a nervousness along the crowd, but it also felt like it etched its way onto the pitch as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bit of both. I think we sort of took our foot off the gas a little bit, um, and kind of took the intensity down, I would say, compared to the first half. Um, but I think as well the change in shape that Rangers were forced into with going down to 10 men, I think really benefited them. I thought that Igmane wasn't really doing too much in the first half with Danilo up beside him. But the minute he went to a lone striker, it just seemed to be that he dominated Knister and Dorrington every long ball that came his way. And I think having Hefty and Tavernier on as actual natural fullbacks kind of helped their defensive shape a little bit, made them a little bit harder to break down. So it was a little bit frustrating. And like you say, it was a sort of classic Aberdeen goal, one long ball where we sort of lose out on the first ball, misjudge the second. And to be fair, it was a good finish, but you almost feel like the ball shouldn't have made its way to that position for who was at the time, their most informed striker.
Yeah, and as Kaiser says, we should have comfortably seen the game out, and unfortunately, it is a typical Aberdeen goal from this season. It's soft. You highlighted Alfie Dorrington's performance in that first half, and he has a lapse in concentration. It makes a mistake, and yeah, we concede. But just going back slightly to that disallowed goal pre half time, I almost wonder, if they get that goal, does Barry Ferguson make the changes he does at half time? It's all hindsight now and hypothetical sort of situation, because at 2-0 down, he's got nothing to lose, makes the changes, throw them on and see what happens. And yeah, now he looks like a miracle worker. But um, I don't know. It's just extremely frustrating the way that we unnecessarily let them back into the game. And even at 2-1, they still weren't doing much in terms of, again, like I said, not making much in the way of saves. They didn't create much, but unfortunately, neither did we.
No, and I mean, I think, like you say, I think we sort of took the foot off the gas a little bit, got a little bit passive. I don't think the changes really helped that, like we said before about Clarkson. When we did bring on the likes of Sockler and Daba, it just kind of made us way too narrow. The team that ended the game, Ockles being our only out and out winger, who I thought was, a reasonable performance from him. But I think Daba, Nisbet, Sockler, they were all wanting to come too central, and it was kind of forcing Clarkson into these clipped balls in behind, which Rangers were more than happy to sweep up because they were never going to cause any issue. And I think if we did just stick to our guns in the first half with the ball on the deck and run at them, we could have caused more issues. And again, there were chances to be clinical. Nisbet missing a good chance prior to his disallowed goal. And it just
Yeah.
kind of felt a little bit stagnant as we came into that second half.
That Nisbet chance, and thanks for bringing that back into my memory, because I'd tried to erase that. Um, Again, that's the good and the bad of Kevin Nisbet. I mean, how he doesn't hit the target with that chance, I still don't know.
And I feel sorry for Dorrington on the back of that, because he just turned into the trickiest winger in the world. Um, Keeping the ball in close control like that and getting his head up and picking him out was great. But yeah, from my position, I thought I'd nestled in the bottom corner. Sadly, didn't see anyone wheeling away. But yeah, I think it's kind of, I think, the tale of yesterday. Mainly was just our lack of clinical nature, and albeit against a poorer Rangers side, they're still going to get chances. You're still going to have to be clinical and take yours when they come. The likelihood is there'll be a decision, or they, like I say, they'll get chances to get themselves back into the game. So it's just frustrating that we didn't take them in the end.
Yeah, I'm just going through some of the comments because in relation to the second half, I think there's a lot of people that are tuning in with us here live on YouTube. Great to have so many of you getting involved in the comments as well. So, and one of the members of the channel, David McLennan, saying that he's never been so frustrated at the second half, completely off the pace and terrible substitutions. We'll come on to the substitutions in just a second. He also made another point saying we got nervous and tried not to make any errors, so we were slow, sideways, and backwards. Now, I wanted to come to this point because Jimmy Talene spoke about this in his post-match comments, that unfortunately, when you are in a game against 10 men and you maybe get a bit complacent and struggle with, I don't know if it's game management was the word he was trying to use, but players maybe forget, I think was what he was trying to say, is forget what they were doing, in the first half. And he made the comment that David alludes to, that, when we were getting in and around the box, instead of what we were doing in the first half and driving into the box, getting the ball across, it was going backwards and passing it around the box. There was a distinct lack of directness to our attacking play in that second half.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if it was an element, like you said, sort of a fear factor. I mean, that's what it felt like at times. And, for large chunks of the second half, if you just tuned in, you would have thought it was Aberdeen that were down to 10 men. We didn't exploit any of the space that having the extra man advantage gave us, and always just seemed to be so exposed. Whenever Rangers got on the break, there just seemed to be such a big gap between all of our lines, and it was just, yeah, echoing David said, just really, really frustrating. After what felt like being in such a great position in the ascendancy at half time, to then just slowly unpicking itself as the second half ticked out. It was, yeah, a bit of a sore one to take.
Yeah, Michael Taylor saying that we got deeper and deeper and said to them, come on, have a go at us for long periods. For long periods of that second half, we couldn't adapt to playing against 10 men. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree on the point that I felt we kind of let Rangers come at us, because I thought we dominated the ball in the second half. I will agree, I don't think we adapted to playing against 10 men in that second half. I also just don't think we adapted very well to being clinical when we had the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said before, it doesn't matter how poor a Rangers team or a Celtic team you're playing, you've got to take your chances when they come. You're more than likely going to be punished for the ones that you don't. In this case, we were. Again, hindsight's 2020. If we weren't, we'd be saying, "Oh, it was a great performance," and there's nothing really to unpick. But I think the fact that we were undone, it's obviously going to make us a little bit more critical as the performance.
Yeah, and again, if you go back to that first half performance, the midfield battle is such a key ground in these games, and I thought Ante Palaversa was excellent in midfield alongside Leighton Clarkson. Unfortunately, in the second half, though, he picks up, for me, it's a ridiculously soft booking. I don't know if you feel it is a booking. I just think it's very soft, but we know what, like, Stephen McLean, desperate to, do anything he can to get Rangers back into the game. I just felt, though, as soon as that booking came about, that was Palaversa out of the game, because I think Rangers had an opportunity to hit us on the counter, and you saw Palaversa almost go to grab the shirt and then go, shit, I can't, because I'll be going for an early bath as well. So his ability to do the dirty side of the game and make niggly tackles and slow the game down was just totally nullified by that booking. And we, in my opinion, lost that midfield battle as soon as that yellow card was brandished.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I mean, it led to the changes as well. Shinnie having to go into midfield, Jensen having to go over to left back, and Devlin coming on at right back. And I think that kind of, as much as the changes helped Rangers shape and got them going, I feel like, those changes in particular, I think really undone us. Jensen was absolutely burst. He put in some amount of running, as had Shinnie, and then he was expected to go into a hold midfield role and do even more running. It was just Yeah, it just really undid us. Palaver's is not the quickest guy anyway, let alone an hour into the game when he's on a booking.
Hmm.
With Rangers having the fresher legs in that midfield, it was bound to end in tears if we didn't make the change. To me, it's just baffling that the likes of Dante Polvara or even Jack Milne couldn't come into that position and sort of leave that back four as was. I thought Shinnie was coping really well out at left back. Same with Jensen over at right back.
Yeah, James Tasker posing that kind of point that you've just made as well, and I was going to make it as well. James Tasker saying when Palaversa's taken off, surely the direct replacement should have been Dante Polvara. I was going to call him Polaversa there. It's been a long season. I'm surprised we haven't done that sooner. But it does beg the question, what is Dante on the bench for if he can't get on in that situation? Um, you mentioned Jack Milne. I think that would have been a tougher ask for Jack going into that position because it was a player playing out of position, and again probably provided more questions around why Dante doesn't come on if that was just the like for like swap. The biggest thing for me in those changes was we weren't just taking one player on and one player off. You take your left back into centre mid, who was coping well. You move your right back, who was supporting the right winger extremely well, to left back. And then you bring on a fresh right back who doesn't, with the greatest respect to Nicky Devlin, have the same pace that Jensen possesses. So it was an extremely disruptive change, and unfortunately, we paid the price.
Yeah, and I think you could say that for pretty much all the changes. Saltler going out to the wing. Okay, I know he's played there before, but naturally a nine. Daba coming on as well, not really had much minutes, and I think that kind of showed with some of his questionable decisions. One that sticks out is a couple stick out. Could have easily played in, I believe, Sockler or Nisbet at one point, and just made a complete mess of it, and then running it out for a goal kick. Just the collective groan that came from around me. I think was echoed around the entire stadium.
I honestly don't know what he was doing at that point. He could have ran towards the goal, and I think it was Enciala that was covering, wouldn't have been able to make a challenge because he would have got in front of Enciala. Why he then decides to run it towards the corner at that point, because I'm sure when he was running through, Sockler was in the middle. He then decides to take it to the corner with no support, but have one of the worst touches I've seen at Pittodrie since I kicked off against St Mirren, trying to do the halftime challenge, and I nearly fell flat on my arse when I tried to first move the ball. And he puts it out for a goal kick, and I was like,
And
holy
I think
fuck.
the most annoying thing on the back of that as well was the little chuckle he had to himself. It just really just irked me. Nothing was funny there, Odie. You've just ruined my weekend.
Yeah, and again, there was a couple of instances. Kevin Nisbet had a head injury, and then he kind of jogged for a little bit, and then decided, "Oh no, I've got a head injury. I'll stop." Like I've seen a few people, make the comments after the weekend that we're too much of a soft touch. We don't know the dark arts of football in terms of killing off the game. And I mean, does this fall on the manager? You could argue the substitutes, but also his style of play. Like I'm a huge advocate of his style of play, but in a situation like that, when you're 2-1 up with 5 minutes to go, do you just have to say to the players, "Look, abandon what we're doing, shut up shop, and see this out"?
I think somewhat it falls on Jimmy. Like I say, I think the changes that came on, I think are squarely on him. I don't think they were really the right ones to make, albeit the bench isn't the strongest at the moment. I just felt like they just kind of really disrupted any sort of positive outlet we had in that second half. But I do think that going off his comments and sort of his time at previous clubs, he does know how to win games dirty. I think Elfsberg's
Mm.
second season of him in charge, they were the most booked team in the league, and um, And I think as well the comments he makes about that lack of penetration, I don't think that was on him for us
Mm.
to sit in. I think that was just, I want to say, some sort of mentality issue, where the players just felt like they couldn't stick to that sort of positive, really direct nature, and they felt like against 10 men, and especially after losing the early goal, that it almost felt like it was second nature for them just to kind of try and see it out instead of extending it. But like you said, I think definitely the change side of it falls onto Jimmy.
Yeah, I just don't understand as well. I saw a couple of people that sit in the main stand say that Toby Keskinen had come over and asked to be substituted off, so whether he was carrying a knock and that was a bit of protection for the weekend, which I'm not opposed to. But why then take Shaden Morris off? Because we're then left with three number nines on the pitch. And as you say, Esther Sokler goes out wide. Again, I also think taking Pape off was the incorrect move in that situation as well, because Pape has experience, as you alluded to on the last episode, if we wanted to use him in that way as a winger, and he was causing problems for that Rangers backline. They looked uncomfortable trying to deal with him. But again, once he went off, they suddenly were very much comfortable in dealing with any sort of threat that we had aerially, let alone the unpredictiveness that Pape brings as well. So there was a frustration um, in that sense as well. But again, we've seen that before from Jimmy Tillene, and there was a comment on screen from Andy Wright about his frustration at Thielen's stubbornness not to change the formation. We should have brought an extra midfielder on. I guess again the shouts for Dante Polvara, and also a comment on Dabag's extremely poor performance. I think again when you bring on subs and they don't perform, I do feel sorry for him in the sense that it's difficult when it's a cameo, but when you play as bad as that, I mean, we've been extremely critical of the likes of Peter Ambrose when he's come on and had a cameo. It's hard in a game of a nature as a Rangers game when there's so much passion and meaning on the game, not just in terms of winning it, but also for what it means for our season. Um, yeah, it felt very much like a defeat. Walking out of Pataudry on Sunday felt like the game when Scott Arfield scored that last minute goal.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best comparison, to draw to it. It not only felt like 2 points dropped, it really did feel like a loss, come the end of that game. And like you said, I think it's the nature in which it was, the points were dropped is what does it. It was the sort of lack of intensity. We're highlighting Dabag, but I mean, most of the subs were in the same boat where they just didn't press. They had fresh legs and it looked like they were running on empty off the bat, and just allowed Rangers all the time. But to concede the goal as well in that nature, again, in a very typical Aberdeen fashion, a long ball, which we overcommit to, lets Dessers in behind. We almost look like we just expect them to score. Everybody stops. Nobody closes out quick enough to Jeffy and Hadji, obviously with a perler of a strike. Again, in fairness to him, a good finish. But again, you almost feel like the ball shouldn't be getting to that position, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the frustration. The frustrating thing about that goal is that it should have never ended up at Hadji's feet in the first place.
Yeah. Do you think the players got slightly distracted by whoever in Section S thought it was wise to throw the ball on the pitch and think that the game would get stopped?
I mean, whoever did it, if you're going to do it, at least put a bit of bloody oomph into it and get it, actually into where the ball's being played. I'm pretty sure they did it whilst the ball was well away. It was either in the middle of the park or over on the left wing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they were attempting to do, and I think it's a very weak shout to try to give that for a disallowed goal, and especially as well considering it was our own doing. Like, do you know what I mean? It was our own fault. You shouldn't have thrown it on, or if you were, at least give it a bit of muscle.
Speaking about disallowed goals, we haven't touched on it. I want to come to that just before we kind of wrap up on this game. Kevin Nisbet thought he'd put Aberdeen 3-1 up. before VAR gets involved and rules the ball out for handball. From all accounts, it's the correct decision because it's the last piece of Kevin's body it touches before he puts the ball in the back of the net. Therefore, rightly or wrongly, however your view is on it, VAR is correct to rule the ball out. I just think when the ball ricochets off Desser's arm on its way towards Nisbet, in my opinion, where's the consistency? I also don't know how much Kevin Nisbet knows about it. Yes, I'll agree that it hitting his arm does probably help in terms of the control for him to finish it. But yeah, your thoughts on that goal being disallowed?
I'm going to sound very Ali McCoist here. By the letter of the law, it shouldn't have stood. But it's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. Like you say, the ricochet of Dessers, I think it's a really counterintuitive rule when one handball, which, if the ball then doesn't fall to Knooster, are we getting a penalty? I don't know how you can deem two very identical situations, where one is disallowed and one's deemed as fine. It's really frustrating, and the initial angles that I saw of it, I wasn't really too sure how good an angle they really had as to whether it came off Kevin's arm or his stomach. But yeah, just it's one of those ones where I think if Dessers had scored it at the other end, you would have been screaming for it to be disallowed.
I thought you were going to say if Desser scores that at the other end, there's no chance it's getting chalked off, because I would have agreed with that.
I was going to say we'd be screaming for it to be given, but I can guarantee it wouldn't have been chalked off. But
I think the other thing about that rule as well, though, is had it then, after hitting Nisbet's arm, hit either another player or there'd been another bit of control before he put the ball in the back of the net, the goal would have stood. So, yeah, clear as you like.
But unfortunately, counterintuitive is.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't count, and unfortunately, Rangers did go up the other end of the pitch and grab an equalizer. It's now the 7th goal that Aberdeen have conceded in injury time, and the goal drew comparisons to what really has been a kind of turning point in both seasons for Aberdeen and Hibs, when Mats Knooster's channels his inner Slobodan Rubezic and needlessly rushes out from defence. Yes, you could argue Leighton Clarkson should do a little bit better in midfield. Shinnie's ball watching. Knooster's charges out, leaving Dorrington with 2. Dorrington and Devlin aren't in line either, so there's not even a chance of Dessers being offside. And then again, I think both Devlin and Dorrington are caught ball watching when Dessers hits the inside of the post, and Yanis Hadji, as you've said, take nothing away from that strike. But again, from an Aberdeen point of view, it's all sorts of bad.
Yeah, again, like I said, it's very much our own doing. Ball really shouldn't make its way to Hadji. It should arguably be dealt with a lot sooner, potentially by Clarkson, and just humped into Rosehead, or like you say, if Devlin was a little bit more switched on to follow the line that Dorrington had set, perhaps Dessers has caught a hair offside. Just really frustrating. It's the gut punch nature of it all. Last kick of the game, just really shite way to end it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say other than that. I'll go to George Ironside's comment. Did we throw away 3rd place with that goal?
It felt like it walking out the stadium. It felt like we'd basically just given it to Hibs on a platter. I think now that the split fixtures are out, obviously we'll come to talk about that. Having Hibs in that opener, it makes that game very important. If we can beat them at Pittodrie, that then puts a lot more pressure on them to be picking up the results. And that comes down to being vitally important that we do win at Pittodrie. If we don't, I can't see us catching up at that point. But definitely at full time on Sunday, it did feel like being 3 points behind, it chucked it.
Yeah, I have to admit as well that I definitely thought that, but it wasn't helped by the fact that when I looked at the live league table on live score after Hibs had kicked off, I thought they were a point ahead of us, not realizing, of course, because they were drawing. That was why. So, assuming they won, I spent most of Sunday thinking Hibs were 4 points ahead of us, therefore third was well and truly thrown away, only to then realize no, they are in fact three, albeit. I think you could argue they are four given the goal difference swing. But as you said, of course, with the fixtures being announced, that does change things slightly. And since I'm being very clever with the YouTube tonight, we've had the ticker tape. Now let's go for a full banner. Let's talk about those post-split fixtures on screen now for those watching the podcast. So the Dons do start with Hibs at home in what feels like a must-win game if we have any hope of finishing third. We then travel to Paisley to face this season's bogey side in St Mirren. Congratulations on them for winning the league for the second time in getting into the top six. Dons then travel to Rangers on Sunday, the 11th of May, before the midweek home game against Celtic. That is the final home game of the season. And then the Dons head to Tannadice on Sunday to round off the season in what could potentially be an all-important game in that race for third, fourth, and fifth. So exciting set of fixtures, and probably looking at it, Phil, the perfect start to the top six with those two fixtures.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, like I say, it's important that we beat Hibs in that first game, put the pressure on them to pick up points. Law of averages would also dictate that hopefully we're in line for a win at St Mirren, being a not very happy hunting ground for us over the past few years. So, yeah, picking up 3 points in Paisley would be ideal. And then it's really just coming down to the fact of you're hoping it's a league title celebrating hungover Celtic side that come up to Pittodrie, and we can bring it down to the Dundee United game to potentially wrap up third place.
Yeah, I guess with that Celtic game, you're potentially looking for them to, again, with the greatest respect to St Johnstone, have one eye on a Scottish Cup final, as you've said. You're probably expecting them to, well, they can, of course, win the league in their first post-split game at Tannadice, which, again, potentially helps us as well. If, of course, we get that result against Hibs. And it's an interesting one because it is the fixture I think that we needed to have for our own benefit, but I think also for the fans' benefit. As I said, I spent most of Sunday moping about that we were 4 points behind. Then I realised that it's only 3, so our best opportunity is face Hibs first, because, if we'd been given Celtic and they could have won the league here, that would have just been a terrible start to the top six. But Michael Taylor saying looking at least 9 points from the post-split fixtures. Andy Wright saying that simply we have to beat Hibs and Dundee United in terms of our chance for third place. John Kelo saying a win by 3 or more goals against Hibs will certainly help the difference as well. On the Hibs game, though, let's come to the next big talking point. The ticketing information for the game has been released, and it sees Aberdeen fans with the opportunity to buy tickets in Section R, which is known as a section given to visiting fans. So the Dons have cut Hibs' allocation for what is a huge game. I can understand why Aberdeen have done it. I don't personally agree with it. As a footballing fan that enjoys seeing atmosphere, being able to go to away games when I can, knowing that currently with the way allocations are, I can never get a ticket for Tynecastle legitimately. I would rather have seen a full Hibs end come up. Where do you stand on this one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I understand that the club must have some sort of indication that we're going to be able to sell more tickets. And at that side, I know that Hibs previously didn't bring that much up to Pittodrie for their last game. But it just all feels very old firm central beltish doing this whole cutting allocations tit for tat nonsense. It's not a good look for the league. It's only going to come back and bite us next season when Hibs, we already don't get the top deck. Hibs are just going to cut it even more, no doubt. And to be honest, I wouldn't blame them on the back of it. And like I say, then just comes back into the cycle of this tit for tat nonsense that Scottish football seems to do. And I think it's something it's got to really be sorted out from the top. I think the SFA needs to do something to basically not only regulate the prices of away tickets, but regulate an expected minimum for an away end. It boosts the fan experience. It boosts the general atmosphere. It makes it more fun to watch for TV games. It's not one that I'm very keen on.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say as well, you're right in mentioning that it looks better for TV games. I think what is great for this game is the fact that it's going to be a Saturday 3 o'clock. So that, in theory, should help. Paul Donaldson is, shares an opinion that I've seen a few people have. Certainly in the comments on our Twitter page at RTG_podcast, if you don't follow us on there, where he says, I don't mind as long as we fully sell out the home end. It's not going to look too good if we don't have a full house in the home end. And again, completely echo that last part. And I think it was Kaiser that made the comment. Yeah, it was, who said the game will struggle to sell out if we don't beat Hearts on Saturday as well. And I think, both points by Kaiser and Paul are very fair, because cutting a Hibs allocation, given the run that Hibs are on, I fully expect them to sell out. It isn't really good. And again, it goes back to just Scottish football as a whole. This tit for tat nonsense around away allocations, not selling the game and selling the atmosphere that we have to its full potential, just out of pure pettiness at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, players on the pitch kind of want that atmosphere as well. There's nothing quite like it to G you up than a bit of a sort of hostile environment. And I think, like you say, the fan experience in general, it just without a solid away support, it doesn't really give you much to go off of and feed off either. As a crowd, and it not only gives a stagnant atmosphere in general, but I think it really deflates the home side of things, especially in the south stand, which is silent at the best of times for the most part. They need
It's not
something to
like,
go.
I mean, it's not like those that are going into Section R are adding any atmosphere next to a noisy, you expect, noisy away end. Section S is known for being that kind of noisy section in the south stand, and would have that back and forth with the away fans. So there's almost like a block goes in between, quite literally, the noisier element of the south stand and then the away fans as well. So that's kind of disappointing in a sense as well. And I just think it takes a lot away from what would have been an excellent game. But if we can somehow sell it out, then that's absolutely terrific. But putting a lot of pressure on ourselves for that.
Yeah, massively. Like you say, Section R, it's people that'll be buying tickets on the day, so it's it's a strange one in my opinion that we've decided to cut them down. I think it's 900 tickets, I believe.
Yeah, well, I think because I know Motherwell took 700 in those sections when it was a tenner, but I think some of the tickets have been returned because there was no pay on the day. So yeah, I think it's around that 900 mark for Hibs. But I know Paul Cool was speaking on our Twitter mentions, saying that given what they took, albeit that game was pre-Christmas and they were on an extremely poor run, it's maybe around the average of what they've taken. So it should cover it. But again, I think personally, I thought he was on the wind up around that, just maybe trying to get a few bites off Hibs fans, but maybe not. Another kind of way to look at it as well, with Hibs being that first game post-split, and I share the sentiment that John Kelo shared, our season could well be over, you maybe want to put the word over in inverted commas. I know John hasn't, within the next 2 games. Do you see that point of view?
I mean, yeah, overs maybe slightly harsh. I mean, it definitely feels less exciting, perhaps. I think everybody's kind of looking forward to the possibility of a cup final and a third place European football. I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing. I think after the good run, we kind of put this high expectation on Jimmy, and I think it's been a case over the last few months of regrounding ourselves. I mean, before he came in, everyone was quite happy with a sort of top 6, top 5 ideal sort of finish. So yeah, I think it will give us a good benchmark as well. I think there's a lot of positives that can be taken these last sort of 6 or 7 games, however many might be left, depending on the semi-final outcome. But there's a lot of positives to be taken going into next season in terms of assessing the squad and looking at where we need to fill those gaps and sort of maybe experimenting a little bit with what can be changed.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I kind of share that sort of sentiment to an extent is if you kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of you lose the excitement of looking forward to seeing us win a trophy. You lose the excitement of us being in the race for finishing third. Effectively, I don't see how we overhaul what would really turn into a 7-point difference with the goal difference. And then once again, you're then having to hope Celtic win the Scottish Cup to benefit us finishing 5th. And we go into I think someone's put it in the comments earlier. I didn't start it, so I can't remember, but it was the second qualifying round of the Conference League. So I think that then gives you 3 games just to get to the group stages, or 3 two-legged ties before someone gets pedantic on that. So yeah, just I guess, as you said, it really would kind of more take the excitement, again, if you want to put that in inverted commas, out of the season if the next 2 games are not to go the way we hope.
Yeah, I mean, just now it still feels like we've got something to play with or play for, shall I say. Unlike the Rangers fans who, outside of Europe, have no cup final, no ambition of winning the league left to win. So I hope they're all enjoying tuning in to their nothing season.
Yeah. In terms of, just quickly on that top 6, again, because there was some debate, and I kind of looked at a few of the comments around after John made the point about our season being over potentially in the next 2 games. On the top 6 as a whole, Paul Donaldson saying, if we end up finishing 5th, some people will say at least it's an improvement on last season. However, Hibs and Dundee United would have overtaken us. Why have they been able to improve more than us? Well, they didn't go on a run where they didn't win a game for 2 months, first and foremost. Well, I know Hibs did, but yeah, that's probably one reason. And again, Andy kind of maybe in a bit of coming back to Paul's point, saying he thought that 4th to 6th in the first year of Jimmy would be a solid start, but it will feel disappointing after the start we had and points we dropped. I guess, though, you get to Hampden twice as well, potentially a final in there. It could be seen as a solid start, or would 5th be seen as disappointing?
I think,
Or would,
from my
I guess
perspective, I don't.
actually, maybe even on that, would anything less than 3rd be disappointing, as Andy says, given the start we had and the points we dropped?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think from my perspective, I don't think it would. I think this has been a good experience for Jimmy, and I think he's learned a lot, I think, from this year, and I think he'll take a lot of that into next season. And I think that's the main thing we can take from this. Conversely, I think the start to the season probably did perhaps allow us to become a little bit more over exuberant, shall we say, about our expectation. And I think we did maybe kind of put a lofty ambition on what we would think Jimmy would be able to do with the current shape of the squad. And, the injuries have set that back as well. I think that's important to note, that we are still a weak inside on the injury front. So, in my opinion, I don't think it would be a failure of a season. to finish outside of the top three.
No, well, like I said, if we finish outside of the top three and lift the Scottish Cup, then it's definitely not a failure. And that, I guess, leads us nicely to the trip to Hampden and previewing that, as top six Aberdeen face bottom six Hearts this weekend. I saw someone ask in the comments how many tickets have we sold for this weekend. If anybody's got Ewan Duthie on speed dial, I'm sure he'll give you the exact figure. But as we've seen before at Hampden, Phil, attendances don't win you football matches. It doesn't matter how many of us are in attendance, it's what matters, what the players do on the pitch. How much of an opportunity is this game this weekend, not only obviously reaching a Scottish Cup final, but the perfect game in a sense to bounce back from the disappointment of conceding that last minute goal at the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, playing a bottom six side in the semi-final is always a little bit of a luxury. Especially a bottom six side that you've finished above 11 out of 13 times always bodes a little bit well. But don't let the third biggest force in Scotland hear you say that. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Neil Critchley. I think he's struggled notoriously against top six sides this season. When he has been trying to play his way in, he's struggled against likes of ourselves, Hibs, Dundee United, and obviously Celtic and Rangers. Hearts fans have started to turn on him ever so slightly. You almost feel like if they don't make a semi-final, don't make the final, paired with a bottom six finish, his P45 could be around the corner. So I think that kind of bodes well on us because he'll be forced to maybe take some risks. And I think, going off especially that first half with how effective we were with Topi and Shaden out wide, the bigger pitch just gives them, all the more joy, hopefully, to really exploit that Hearts back line. And like you say, we'll be against it numbers wise, but I think that should be something that should be used not only as motivation for those in attendance to raise their voices, but those on the pitch as well to, give the people that have travelled down something worth celebrating. On which, if anyone's got a spare seat on a bus or a car that wants to take a straggler down to Glasgow, please let me know.
Yeah, I know. Ironic after the normally you're down in Edinburgh, and when I've got a spare seat in the car, I'll actually be in Edinburgh the night before the game, coming through from Edinburgh, and you're up in Aberdeen. So yeah, if anybody can help Phil out with transport to the semi-final, either get in touch with Phil directly or drop the podcast a message either on Instagram at rtg.podcast, because Phil picks that up, or at rtg_podcast on Twitter, and I will pass it on to Phil. I want to go back to the point you made about Neil Critchley being under pressure and his record against top six teams. Also, the fact he's not beaten an Aberdeen side this season as well. He's under pressure from Hearts fans. There will be certain sections of the Aberdeen support, certainly not the two of us, that will feel Jimmy Tillene's under a little bit of pressure after the weekend and the manner in which we threw that game away. I was going to say, what team handles the pressure better, or what team being under pressure, what team's under pressure more? You can tell we don't script these podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I think a lot of people will be expecting a reaction from the Aberdeen side. And I think with the magnitude of the Hibs game starting off the split, you're needing that reaction to kind of give us that momentum going in there. I still kind of feel like Hearts have got a lot more to play for. I feel like it's very much a Scottish Cup final or bust for them. Earlier on we were sort of saying our season's over. If we lose the next two, Hearts' season's really over if they lose on Saturday. Because whatever they do in the bottom six really isn't going to make a difference. And even then, they're still not mathematically safe from avoiding a playoff either. I think there's only 7 points between them and Dundee. So, I feel like there is a lot of pressure on Hearts to not only pick up momentum, but to kind of give them something to play for.
Does that suit us or suit our approach with them being under pressure?
I think so. Like I said earlier, I think Critchley's going to be forced to field a team that will take risks, which, if it works, then I'll be eating my words. But, with the pace we have out wide, and we saw how effective that was against Rangers. Hearts have a kind of similar system with really high fullbacks. You would like to think that we could expose that. It's just a case of, again, being more clinical when the chances do appear.
I suppose also though the way that we press high, that does leave us to exposure on the counter attack, which we did see Rangers do to with some success, albeit failing to find the back of the net when they did counter attack at the weekend. But it's interesting, you say that they'll be almost forced to, a team that takes risks. They went into a game that they had to win to, obviously keep their top six ambitions in their own hand, and failed to register a shot on target, I think, until after the 75th minute. I know obviously they were missing James Wilson through suspension. He returns this weekend, but they ended the game with Lawrence Shankland and Craig Halkett up top. So potentially lacking in attacking threats, and hopefully we can deal with any of them in terms of defensively. I think you make a good point in terms of the way we attack. I think a lot of us will take a lot of positivity from that first 45 in particular on Sunday against Rangers, in the way both Toby Keskinen and Shayden Morris had extreme success against high fullbacks. I guess one counterpoint, and I'm not here saying that I want Shayden Morris to be on the bench, because I think, in a game like this, we need to start with our best team and look to take the game to Hearts and really kind of pile any pressure on, because of course, Hearts have sold 20,000, or is it 200,000? I lose track with how many tickets their fans tell us they've sold. If Shayden Morris starts this game and does well, John Keel made a point earlier in the show in the comments about we lose his impact off the bench, and he felt that was an issue that was then evident on Sunday's game with the change and the lack of pace in the wing. Does that maybe come into consideration this weekend? I personally would say no, but is it, after seeing what happened on Sunday, maybe something that might niggle at Jimmy Tillene?
Yeah, potentially. In that case, you're probably looking at bringing in Jeppe Ockels, and then that forces Topi out right, which I then think weakens us annoyingly, because he has looked so much better on the left. You'd be looking at probably a weird shape change, or putting somebody like Ockels into the 10 and Pape out on the right, if you were wanting to kind of have that Morris impact off the bench. But I'm very much with you in the sense of, I think Shayden's been so impactful these past few weeks that I think he's got to remain in that starting lineup. And similar to Michael, as I've said earlier, I think on paper that the team that's been out the last couple of weeks is our strongest team. And I think that should probably remain, not only from a consistency standpoint, but I think it genuinely is the best at our disposal at the moment.
Yeah, Michael Taylor's comment, for those obviously listening to the podcast, is that he wouldn't change the starting 11. Pre-match against Rangers, Christos Tobers and Dimi Mitov didn't, quite make, I don't know if they had fitness tests, but the game came too soon for them, I think, were the words of Jimmy Tillene. If both are fit, do either or both come into the starting 11? I know we've spoken about not changing the starting 11, but of course we're here for a very much reason that Jimmy Tillene is in the dugout, so he makes the important decisions. But because we're here, we get to give an opinion, shite or not. You make your mind up. But Christos Tobers and Dimi Mitov, if fit, do you start them?
It's a tough one. I think we've spoken a lot about consistency across your centre halves and your goalkeeper, and really building that partnership. And again, I can't remember if it was last week's episode or the episode before, I'd sort of mentioned that I'd kind of felt like Mitov had been rushed back previously, and I'd rather that didn't happen again going into the split. So I suppose it all depends on how he's been training, and sort of, how fit and sharp he is. I'd be inclined not to put any of them in, perhaps depending on where the game is, with sort of 20 minutes to go. Tobers perhaps coming in for Dorrington, just to get him some minutes back in the legs. But I certainly think Mitov might be Might be a little bit of a risk putting him back in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's maybe because he hasn't had anything of note to do in the last two games. I think it'd actually be a bit harsh on Ross if he's dropped for Dimmy, but I don't know. There's a part of me that wouldn't be opposed to seeing Tobers come back into that starting lineup. I know a few people actually also mentioned that Gavin Malloy was on the pitch pre-match training with the team. Again, I don't know if this weekend comes too soon for him, but I'd probably have Tobers over Malloy personally. And if I'm replacing one of the centre backs, unfortunately, I'm replacing Alfie Dorrington. I don't think you can take Knoosters out that team. But yeah, I think it is strange that we've kind of at this point in the season almost stumbled in a way against our best team, and I certainly didn't think I'd be advocating for Pape to continue in that starting role, but certainly felt his performance from the weekend, obviously grabbing the goal as well, has done enough to merit that.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the height that Hearts have at centre half as well, I think the logical, player to have on is Pape if he can be as sort of disruptive and effective as he was against Rangers. Like I said, that was one of his better performances as a sort of target man. So hopefully starting to find his feet there and get us going forward.
Yeah, and I think, well, I saw a post, and I don't know the rules if you get a booking in the semi-final, if you are suspended for the final or not, but only Christers Tobers and Sivert Helton Nielsen are the two Dons players on bookings going into this game anyway. But I don't think we're going to see Nielsen. No pun intended on that, given he's out with an eye injury. Honest. In terms of the game, though, as I said, a lot's obviously being made around the crowd, but as we all know, football games are won on the pitch. So, what is going to be the key battleground this weekend between the two sides, do you reckon?
I say it every week, and it's the midfield. I don't care who you're playing against. I think the midfield's where you win or lose games, especially on a pitch the size of Hampden. Whoever can control that and get their team going forward, I think's going to be successful. And the midfield that started the past few games of Pape, Clarkson, and Palaversa, I don't think have shown signs of really being a weak midfield. I think Clarkson especially has kind of risen to that role. And if we can get him and Palaversa getting their foot on the ball and hitting Shaden and Tope out wide, then I think we could be looking at a nice successful afternoon on that big park.
Yeah, and the thing is, as much as it's going to be made about playing on a bigger pitch, I don't even know how much bigger it is than Pataudry, but from a winger's point of view, surely a pitch like that would then suit the likes of Palaversa and Leighton Clarkson, who enjoy having time on the ball. And Leighton Clarkson, you would like to think, is going to be going into this game 10 feet tall. I mean, I bet he wishes he was 10 feet tall. But full of confidence after not only the goal, of course, from the weekend, but just his general performances over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he's a player that you would like to think is relishing occasions like this. Should be the games that he really came to Aberdeen for. The important crunch time games where he can really make his mark. And I think we've really seen the best of him these past few weeks. I mean, how long this season have we been advocating for him to really show the sort of player that he is? And I think he's really stepped to the fore these past few weeks.
Yeah, I would agree on that as well. And of course, I guess we didn't actually mention it with the goal. It could be up there again for another contender for goal of the season as well. I'm surprised actually, because we're 2 weeks on Thursday away from Player of the Year, and that we haven't seen the voting come out for that. Maybe they're waiting to see if there's a magic moment at Hampden this weekend before they put that in for goal and player of the season as well. Still looking forward to that night, albeit that might change depending on the result of that Hibs game as well. That might change the mood of the night. But hopefully, though, we've got a Scottish Cup final to look forward to. We're doing this on Tuesday night. Some of you might be listening or watching this on as part of your pre-match routine, your drive down to Hampden later on in the week. But Currently 20-9 on a Tuesday night, Phil. Where are your emotions ahead of a Scottish Cup final? Is there excitement building in? Any nerves yet?
Well, I mean, the excitement and nerves might come when we're officially in the final. But yeah, no, excited. You know, a day at Hampden is always good fun, and if we can get to a final, all the better. If we can't, then I'll just crumble into a ball of misery, become an alcoholic, and die young, perhaps.
Yeah, drink responsibly, troops. No, I think it's one of those as well. Like it's still early in the week, but as the build up continues, I saw Aberdeen post an interview with John Hewitt, saying the players just need to have a bit of belief. I'm sure all of us going down to Hampden carry the belief that the players absolutely should have going into this game. And as long as they can believe, stick to task, there's no reason why we can't win the game. I think I'll certainly be more nervous than excited when it comes to Saturday. I just hope that when we reconvene next week, it is a Scottish Cup final that we've got to preview, and it means that, well, not only does the players' season extend a little bit, but so does ours, because it means one way or another we'll have to review a Scottish Cup final, and I would absolutely love to have to do a review of us winning the Scottish Cup. I think that would be an episode for the ages.
Yeah, I think that might be the drunkest podcast that's ever graced the airwaves, I think.
Yeah, well, we can but dream, and of course, the Scottish Cup allows all of us as fans to dream. Let's hope those dreams continue come Saturday afternoon, certainly, with thoughts to the final turning. But in the meantime, just a big thanks to everyone that's tuned in and interacted with the live here on YouTube as ever. If you're still watching, remember to leave a like on the video, comment your thoughts down below if you're catching up as well, and follow us on your audio platform of choice. Safe travels to those heading to Hampden, and until next time, we'll see you then.